All done. All silent. Going. Go. So congratulations.
Welcome to the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate. Each episode, we chat with real estate author and industry leader Peter O'Malley to discuss the current property market conditions and provide insights to assist you on your property journey.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Current Market Insights. I'm your host, Kieran O'Brien, and with me as always is my good friend, Mr. Peter O'Malley. Peter, hello.
Hello, Kieran. Great to see you.
Great to see you, Peter. Let's jump straight in tonight. I wanted to ask you a question, if I could, to kick off this week's episode.
Sure.
We've always got topics in mind and we come prepared with things that I really want to tackle. But I wonder, what's something you are seeing in the market at the moment that you suspect maybe most consumers aren't really aware of or not fully aware of the implications of whatever it may be, that you'd really like to talk about, and I guess it, give some insights and some information to help protect people out there from, potentially losing in property, which is what we try to do, every week.
Yeah, I'd have to say the new emergent trend that we're seeing, Kieran, is people that are signing legal documents digitally. Just press here once, twice, we're all good to go. And everything's really simple for the consumer, actually too simple at the point of signing. But they are signing legally binding documents, and they're getting caught out down the track by having absolutely no idea what it is that they've signed. So you remember, if you were going to buy a car or when you were looking at your first property, your parents' famous words to you always were,
read the contract.
Don't sign anything. Have a look.
I wish I'd said that. Gosh.
But don't sign anything. And don't sign anything is really a phrase which is, no matter how good the deal seems, step away from it, fully understand it before you are legally committed. Where salespeople have turned their services, wrongly or rightly, whether it be conveyancing, real estate, selling cars, whatever, they've turned it into a version of Amazon where it's a one button stop and everything happens from there. Now, if you make a order on Amazon and you're unhappy with it, they'll probably accept a refund. But if you sign up for a $8,000 or $9,000 sales campaign payable upfront, whether it sells or it doesn't, and things don't work out, rest assured, even though you might think it's grossly unfair that you've got to pay that $8,000, $9,000, even though it was buried in the fine print, you still need to pay it because the real estate agent's got your signature on a legally binding document. And I know this seems all really straightforward and simple, and it's kind of, to some people, it's like, really, is that something that needs to be spelt out? And the answer to that is yes, it does need to be spelt out, because I'm seeing people every week at the moment that are crying foul because they're committed to documents that they had no idea what those documents contained.
Okay, so there's a couple of things I guess I'd like to get some clarity on just from your viewpoint. Digital signing has obviously exploded, through the COVID era. It's been one of those technological advancements. You talk specifically about vendors getting trapped or sellers getting trapped with, $8,000 or $9,000 fees that they didn't necessarily know they were signing up for. Are you talking about, in this particular example, are you talking about cases of people signing on their laptop and viewing the contract and the documents there? Or are you suggesting that, some agencies or platforms are allowing people to just bring out their mobile or a tablet and flick their finger and actually commit to a sales contract?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right. So they can just pop it up on a 6-inch screen.
Agency agreements, contracts, whatever. Yeah.
On a 6-inch screen, and the sellers just, click a button, put their fingerprint, whatever it is, and that's it.
Most importantly, they're spending their time and energy working out how to execute the document and giving zero consideration to what is in the document and signing it 100% on trust. So if someone later tonight hands you a physical copy of a legal document and says, sign this, you're going to step back and say, I've got to get, when you see the breadth and the magnitude of the document, you're going to say, hey, I've got to get my head around this before I commit to it. But if I send you that same document in a digital version and say, Kieran, all you've got to do to move forward with this is just sign in the 2 spots that I've given you permission to sign in, and we're away, and suddenly I've removed all the obligation, all of the pain of getting your head around the legal documents, and I'm moving you forward. And moving forward's great when everyone's friends. But when things start to unravel, which they are at the moment for many vendors in the marketplace, because the auction clearance rate is 45%, meaning there's a 55% failure rate, what you signed, what you're committed to, suddenly matters.
You know, it's interesting. I have signed heaps and heaps of things through DocuSign. Is probably the most prolific platform. And I've always considered that when someone sends me a document, it says start, you know, it gives you a prompt. Here's the start of your contract or whatever it might be. And you click start and it just skips over 35 or 105 or 250 pages straight to where you've got to sign. And it's funny we're talking about this because I have never considered, which is absolutely stupid in retrospect, I've never considered that that's actually taking away my ability to really digest the information as opposed to what it's sold as, which is click this. It's so much easier for you to just get to the point you need to be. You don't even have to scroll and look for it. I've never considered that, and I'm actually embarrassed to say that now, that, you know, I'm someone who does read contracts. But when I do digitally sign, I just think, oh, thank gosh, they've made it so I can just go to the signing part.
They've made it so easy.
Yeah.
But they haven't made it less risky. They haven't made it less obligation orientated. It's not less legal. They've just made it easier. Too easy.
Do you know, I have a personal anecdote actually on this exact scenario. So when my wife and I bought our place, we read through our mortgage agreement and I read through it once and, you know, I took all the due diligence and did the things I needed to. And then when it came time to sign, I did that. You know, I clicked the digital thing and it took me through to, you know, the next one and whatever, one of the 8 signatures I had to do. And I completely missed in that process that the fixed rate agreement we had agreed upon with the broker was not in that agreement and it was variable. And it's cost us a fortune actually over the last couple of years because of that error. And I know that I wouldn't have missed that on a printed contract because that was something I specified hard all throughout the negotiation. And it's, you know, here's a great example of where we've now had to pay exponentially more money on our property over the last couple of years because we got stung by an error, a broker's error in this case, that he, you know, thankfully admitted to, but still we've had to pay for it. So I can completely understand this scenario.
Yeah, well, during COVID, that's when digital signatures in the real estate industry exploded and these programs, this prop tech took over. And for a while now, I've been watching consumers, you know, in a really simplified fashion, just signing off. Yeah, we'll buy that house, we'll sign that agency agreement, we'll sign up to that campaign and we'll hire that furniture. And they're just, you know, committing to serious legal documents and committing to serious amounts of money without having a full sense of what it is that they're obligating to and not even giving it a moment's thought. And you've added another element just there. People are doing it with the mortgage documents, and there's probably other areas of their life where outside of the real estate space where these digital signatures are really easy at the front end, but they do have ramifications, unfortunately, for some people at the back end. And for years, I've trained all of our team members, as you know, you do not proofread anything on a computer screen. You must print it out, read it, mark it up, and go back and clean it up. The amount of times I write an email and I'm about to press send, and it's like, no, follow your own rules, have the discipline to print it out, proofread it in tangible format, and I just spot errors all the time in printed format that I miss on the computer screen. Here you are outlining a scenario where variable versus fixed is mixed and the rates are what they are, and it's proven costly, which may have been captured if it was, printed out, proofed, and then, yeah, we're good to go, let's sign off on it. So lawyers will often send consumers a contract saying you're good to sign that contract now, and that's different to what we're talking about here. If your lawyer has perused the document and instructed you or advised you that it's okay to put a digital signature on it, by all means go ahead and do so. But signing legally binding digital documents blindly is madness, and it's increasing. And because it is increasing, the number of people being caught out by it are increasing.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's okay to trust your conveyancer or your solicitor, but I wouldn't trust the salesman with any contract, which is why we have solicitors look them over, right, when there's a property for sale. I wonder, with the advent of these platforms, particularly on mobile, are there any legal protections for consumers around signing like this? Do they get extra cooling off rights, or is there any escape clause for you know, just going down this pathway of ease and simplicity versus the slower, more methodical approach?
No, if you sign, it's legally binding. It's legally binding.
I assume, though, that if it's an agency agreement, consumers will still have the same protections, as in, they have a right to cooling off, they have a right to...
Oh, you don't take their legislated cooling off rights away from them, but you don't gain any additional rights or new rights just because it's a digital signature versus a wet ink signature. And I do find it interesting that the banks, whenever they want certain documents signed, are still insisting on wet ink signatures. They're not accepting digital. Whether that's a discipline they're trying to instill into their clientele, that you've read this document and we've made you read it because we insisted on wet ink signature, or whether they think there's a risk of fraud or someone calling fraud if it all goes wrong. So a lot of financial institutions do seem to, and stockbrokers do still seem to be insisting on the wet ink signature, which is a good move, I reckon.
Yeah, certainly. Final kind of thing, I guess, on this then, if you are a potential seller and you're negotiating with an agent over an agreement to sell, is it within your rights to demand a paper agreement? Can you just say to the agent, look, I love what you're telling me, but can you put it in paper and let's sit down and actually sign it at your boardroom table, as opposed to this, fingerprint on the fly?
I think any real estate agent that wouldn't want to sit down with a new listing and sign it up in a tangible format would be mad. But it is just so simple in this time-poor world that everyone seems to be existing in at the moment to sign these documents on the fly without having read them. So whether the real estate agent wants to sit down with you or not to sign these documents is not really the point. When a real estate agent sends you documents to sign, my firm advice is you shouldn't sign those documents until you've printed them out, read them, understood them, and taken advice, if you need to, before signing.
Yeah, that's pretty good advice, I think, Peter. Really good topic, and certainly my tale is one of caution, where I could, I wouldn't have had to pay so much money had I been a little bit more vigilant at the time, as opposed to just going for simplicity. But we live and learn. As we move forward tonight, Peter, it's been an interesting week in real estate, as always. The RBA met again for the first time in 6 weeks. And I know the governor's held the rates this time around, but let's have a bit of a chat about what's actually happening in the market and what the messaging looks like from the RBA.
Yeah, look, an interesting week because we had a big inflation number out today, being Wednesday, but the RBA rate decision was on Tuesday. So the RBA were making a rates decision before the market at large had the inflation number. When you look carefully at the dialogue that the RBA used in their statement on Tuesday, you do get a sense that they had a sense that the inflation number on Wednesday was going to be lower, and the inflation rate has come in at 2.7%, which is within the target range. But what everybody is learning now is that they feel that has been achieved by government energy rebates being dished out in a lot of states, which has given us a temporary reprieve on inflation because electricity costs are so high for so many businesses at the moment that as governments try to be seen to be doing the right thing by their constituents and giving cost of living relief measures, which are only temporary, inflation has dipped, but the RBA have signalled they expect it to return to its normal trend. Therefore, even though we're now in the target band of 2 to 3%, the RBA are not showing any signs of wanting to cut rates.
So did the Governor, Michelle Bullock, give any indication in her statement of what the trajectory looks like? Obviously, you've highlighted that they're being cautious still, but usually in the statement there's some kind of undertone or some inclination of what they're thinking of doing in the period moving forward. Is there any thoughts from her as to what the outlook may look like, or whether is there any hope in there for a rate cut in 24 or early 25?
Well, if we go back to that word that we've used in the past, jawboning, which is the RBA will jawbone to come out with a strong message, not because they want to deliver that message, but they want the public at large to heed the message, if you like. The RBA have said here that headline inflation is expected to fall further temporarily as a result of federal and state cost of living relief, and that's really that energy rebate we just discussed. However, our forecasts do not see inflation returning sustainably to target until 2026. And I do draw your attention there to the word sustainably. We've dipped into the target range at the moment, but they've said in the same breath that they don't expect that to stay there and it will return to above 3%. And we're definitely a long way from being sustainably at the midpoint of the RBA's target. Underlying inflation has been above the midpoint of the target for 11 consecutive quarters and has fallen very little over the past year. So the RBA in this messaging are not happy with where the inflation rate is, and a lot of commentators are getting excited about rate cuts because the rest of the world are cutting rates. But as we've been saying, and others have been saying for a long time, the RBA didn't increase interest rates in Australia anywhere near as much as what other central banks did around the rest of the world. Therefore, they don't have the immediate scope to start cutting that others do.
That was going to be my next question, in fact, was to ask you about the US rate cut and, you know, the Fed's decision to bring rates down. But as we have talked about and you've just mentioned then, Australia was at the lowest cash rate for a long time compared to the other, major developed nations. So our movements have been a lot slower and rate cuts are obviously less impactful now for us than they would be for some of these others. What are your thoughts then on some of the media catcalling or the outcries and the rhetoric at the moment and the pressure on the Treasurer to evoke, I think it's Veto 11 or whatever it's called. I can't remember the exact legislative tool, but enact the tool that's never been used to override the RBA and make an interest rate decision at the federal level. Do you think that given we're approaching an election and, the Albanese government probably needs some good news, do you think there's any possibility, even a remote one, that he may do something with the cash rate to try and just evoke a bit of goodwill across the country?
You may remember Liz Truss's prime ministership and the fortnight that it was.
The 42 days, wasn't it, or something?
Yeah, but it came about because she made catastrophic market moves that sent the FTSE into meltdown and nearly toppled the government in a matter of days. And I think personally, if the Australian government of the day stepped in and did that to the RBA, they would set off a chain of events that would be could be anything. Quite simply, the RBA are doing their job, and they know that people are being punished. If the government want to play their role in managing inflation, they need to reduce government spending. If you read between the lines, the reason inflation is stuck so high in Australia now, we have to accept Australia has the highest inflation rate in the world, and it's because of government spending. We've had a very good run economically here, and the government, in wanting to stay in power, stay popular, are pushing that money in different ways back into the economy. You'll see that Chris Minns in New South Wales is trying to be fiscally prudent, but the tragedy for Chris Minns in being fiscally prudent is that he's declining proper wage increases to nurses. Now, who wants to argue against wage increases for nurses? That's a tough sell, and that's what Chris Minns and his government have been trying to manage in the last fortnight. Whereas when you go to Queensland, for example, Stephen Miles is facing an immediate election. He introduced a first home buyers grant and then just doubled it in recent times. Like, he's just flat out trying to buy votes. The Queensland property market is booming at the moment, and this guy's doubling first homeowners grant to keep the boom and the good times going until he gets re-elected. And that's the sort of thing, is that the inflation number is a national number. It's not an Inner West number. It's not a New South Wales number. It's not a Queensland number. It's a national number. And too many governments, state governments and the federal government to some degree, are pushing too much money into the economy. Again, the NDIS is out of control with government money spilling everywhere. We've all heard of people that believe they're on the gravy train with the work they're getting out of NDIS. Now, that's a highly sensitive topic. Who wants to talk about budget cuts for the NDIS? Not many politicians, because that's a really, really tough issue to take on. But the reality is the NDIS is now costing the economy more than Medicare.
Yeah, which, I mean, you've just outlined a whole range of tragedies in one sentence, to be honest, Peter. The Means government's handling of the nurses' salaries is a travesty in its own right. The government is trying to tackle NDIS. To be fair, they're looking at government-regulated bodies, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it is a catastrophic scenario where we're now talking about pharmacists seeing patients because GPs can't. We really are in chaos as a nation, which is why there's a small part of me that thinks that Jim Chalmers is just stupid enough to do something to lift the spirits of the country. But as you say, I mean, Liz Truss was incredibly entertaining to look at from over here.
If you weren't English.
If you weren't British, that's right. For me as an Australian, she was a caricature of politics. But you're exactly right. The flow-on effect of government interjecting is potentially catastrophic. But I find it interesting, that the same media who berating the government consistently over their spending are now saying, well, why don't you evoke this and actually make a difference for people? And it has. It's made it a really charged environment with a lot of complexity.
Oh, it's a complex issue, and tightening the loose spending in the NDIS and how to handle nurses' wages and all those sorts of things. That's high stakes poker. I'm not involved in that. I can see the challenge. I don't pretend to know the answer. And for the Labor Party, they came to power both state and federally, state New South Wales, with inflation on the rise. So they feel like we didn't cause this, but we've now got to bring it to heel, and we're having to punish the people effectively that are most likely to vote for us. So it's a perfect storm for the ALP brand as far as I can see.
Yeah, it certainly is. There's unfortunately always a loser in any of these topics, Peter, and it's all a lot of Australians at the moment, that's for sure. As we wrap up tonight, then, you touched on this a little bit earlier, the clearance rate throughout auctions this week. I'm disappointed you spoiled it so early, but if you can, take us through SQM Research's numbers for the week and how auctions have been looking across Sydney.
Well, we've got a total clearance rate for the week of 45%, 40% for midweek and 47.5% for the Saturday auction clearance rate. So I'll just talk about the weekly auction clearance rate because that's all that matters. 306 properties sold at auction and 333 sold prior. 172 were rescheduled, which is showing you there that a lot of agents are pushing the can, kicking the can down the road, hoping that there's a better market.
25% or something.
Yeah,
it's a huge amount.
It's a big number. This is the last weekend coming up before the school holidays and before the October long weekend. Unsurprisingly, there's a massive amount of properties scheduled for auction this weekend. The clearance rate this weekend will be telling, but I suspect that it will fall below 50% again. Now, 50% clearance rate does not mean the market's crashing. There's a couple of points I'd make about this, Kieran. There's pockets of resistance, there's pockets of strength, and there's pockets of weakness. What this auction clearance rate tells you is not that the market's crashing, it tells you that agents are putting the wrong stock to auction in the majority of cases, because they're going in, and a couple of weeks ago they might have sold a beautiful double front bungalow on 600 square metres and it went well above expectations. So then they go and use that story about auction on a one-bedroom apartment owner and say, this is what happened at auction 4 weeks ago to us around the corner with this Federation house. If you give me your listing, I'll have that sort of outcome happen here on your one-bedroom unit. And that's never going to happen. And I see certain properties that are scheduled for auction, it's just got failure written all over it. Failure if the agent can't secure a sale before the auction day, that is. Failure on the day.
And of course, the agent gets the same fee as he did for the bungalow, for his advertising and the auctioneer and all the other nonsense that goes along with it. As we wrap up then, one interesting point I take from that too is this could be the first week maybe in the last 5 or 6 where the sold prior has come back above the sold under the hammer. We've had a bit of a period where there was quite a few under the hammer sales, only moderately eclipsing sold prior, but it kind of supports the story that you're saying, that there is a lot of stock that probably would sell and clearly is selling, but it's not an auction property. There's not enough interest. There's so much stock out there. The buyers have a choice. It's not the frenzy that the auction agents will tell you it is.
Oh, that's right. I think to run an effective auction, you need at least 4, possibly 5 bidders. And if you're going to auction with just 2 genuine bidders, you'll never exercise the spread between those 2 bidders because there's not a third party to, leverage the situation if you like. And if you have a product that you're putting to market and you are not supremely confident that there will be close to half a dozen bidders on auction day for that property, you've got to give serious consideration to having a negotiated sale.
Yeah, good advice as always, Peter. Really, really great chat this week. Some really interesting topics, and as always, it's a great opportunity to sit back and try and unpick what's happening across Sydney property. Thank you so much, Peter, for coming in.
Thank you, Kieran. Cheers.
And thanks to everyone for listening to Current Market Insights. We look forward to speaking with you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate, the podcast providing real estate insights you won't find anywhere else.